What's up, everybody? It's guubums back with another comps video. It's a new set. That means new videos. Today I got mostly just reroll comps today. If you guys have been playing the set at all, you would know that there's pretty much only two ways to really play in the meta right now, and that's either by playing a fast 9 cap out using legendaries, 5 costs, some 4 costs here and there. Most of the time you're playing Hui, Azir as your carries, and then you're supplementing that with Dragon Lords, up to 4, but you can even play 3, 4, or 5. It doesn't really matter how many you play. That's the strongest way to play the comp. But since that kind of strategy is super difficult to kind of execute, especially at lower levels of play, generally speaking, the best way to climb right now is to really just play around reroll comps. So reroll comps, for those of you who don't know, is just sitting on a lower level. You try to 3-star some of your units. It's the preferred way to play for especially a lot of lower or less experienced players, and it's a really strong strategy right now. Today we're really going over 4 comps. If you've paid attention to the meta at all, you would probably already know what some of these are, but hopefully today I could teach you some of the nuances to some of these comps and how to kind of get in positions where you want to be playing these comps better than I guess how familiar you are with these comps right now. And also I would say for probably 80% of the people watching this, you should probably be playing one of these 4 comps in about 70 to maybe even 80% of your games, just because it's just a dominant strategy for gaining LP right now. And especially if your main goal is to climb at this point, then these comps are just gonna kind of get you there. So first up, you guys have probably already seen this comp. It's just a Bard, Tahm, Kench, Reroll comp. This is probably the single strongest comp in the meta outside of Fast 9 Legendaries. You could argue that it's stronger than Fast 9 Legendaries because it's significantly more consistent. And its item diversity is really strong. And the way you can win games with this comp is also really straightforward. And this comp actually wins a lot of games. I'd find that some of the other comps struggle a little bit harder with winning games. Whereas this comp, you'll actually be able to cap out and win games pretty easily. So, okay, the main strategy with this comp, since it's a 3-cost reroll, is to go level 7. In set 11, they actually changed the odds of level 7 3 costs from 35% to 40%, and nerfed the odds from at level 8 from 35% to 32%. So for the most part, you really want to be staying on level 7. Obviously, as you start getting your 3 stars, you will want to push levels to level 8, to level 9, maybe even to level 10 if you hit early enough to really cap out your board around legendaries and certain 4-cost upgrades that will really kind of add to your comp. So the main idea with this comp is really just stacking Bard as your main backline DPS unit. You're playing Mythic, Story Weaver, and Trickshot with Sivir. Sivir is pretty much the best Trickshot right now in a lot of builds, just because she gives a lot of utility to your team. She gives attack speed to units adjacent to her, and Kale's also really strong. Same idea, also gives attack speed. Obviously attack speed is one of the strongest, if not the strongest, offensive stat in the game, just because it doubles as both auto attack damage as well as helps you generate mana. Bard himself scales really well off of attack speed, so naturally we want to be building attack speed on Bard. Most of the time you want to be angling this comp if you have a bow start, just because you will need at least 1 Rage Blade to play this comp. Ideally you have Rage Blade, Gunblade. Obviously the second Rage Blade is often really hard to get, because at that point you need 3 rods. You're going to need some rods for your front line as well in the form of either Spark, or sometimes you'll need to itemize your Soraka as well in the form of Morello. You need anti-heal, right? So yeah, you want to at least have a bow to start with Bard. You go 1 Rage Blade, and then your second item is Gunblade, and your third item is either a Rage Blade, a Giant Slayer, or a Gambler's Blade, or something of the sort. Maybe even just a Guard Breaker. Anything that amplifies Bard's damage is good. The thing is, he does a decent amount of mixed damage, so you can't really just go the standard either AD or AP. You really have to be building attack speed on him. Red buff is another really good choice, just because, well, if you have that many bows, then you're probably in a good spot anyway. But red buff is a really good choice, just because obviously it gives you anti-heal as well, and it lowers the need for this comp to build a Rage Blade. You don't really need to be going Spark in this comp, just because, or Shiv really in this comp, just because on Kale you can actually go the Shred version of it. So for those of you who don't know, when you pick Kale, when you have put 3 Story Weaver in, you're going to get one of 3 upgrades that you can put on your Kale, and essentially Kale gets one of these 3 items. The first one gives attack speed, the second one gives Shred, and the last one gives Wound, I believe. Naturally speaking, most of the time you're going to be able to want the one that fits out your comp better. So if you need anti-heal, you take the Wound one. If you need Shred and Sunder, you take the Shred and Sunder one. And obviously if you don't need either, you just take the attack speed, because that's the best kind of generic value it can provide to your team. This is going to be true for any comp that plays Kale, with the exception of 7 Story Weaver. And in 7 Story Weaver, you just want to stack it with 3 attack speed augments. Okay, moving on. So the reason why you don't really want Spark or Shiv that much in this comp, as opposed to other traditional comps that you need Shred or Sunder for, is because Kale shreds and sunders at the same time if you choose that augment, or that upgrade. So Bard, who does half physical, half magic, will be doing, you'll get kind of like both sides of that shred going on, and you won't need it. That being said, the rest of the team does do magic damage, and a lot of it. So Bard, even though he's your main carry, is not going to be doing like 99% of your team's damage, unlike some other comps that you guys might be familiar with in the past. Tahm, Kench, and Soraka do a lot of damage, especially if you start itemizing them with late game item carousels or item augments or certain encounters and portals that give you a lot more items. So you can itemize further than just your Bard and your Tahm Kench. Mainly though, you do want to be itemizing your Bard and your Tahm Kench because Tahm Kench is your main frontliner and Bard will be your main DPS. So then I chose these items to go on Tahm Kench. Because Tahm Kench is a health scaling champion that scales very well off of health, you're going to want stuff like Dragon's Claw and Redemption. These are traditionally the two best items that scale well with high HP units. Furthermore, neither of these actually go into any of your Bard items. So obviously this builds out of Belt Tier and this builds out of 2 Cloaks. None of these 3 components you'll find on your Bard, right? So just like being able to stack your Tahm Kench with these items is going to be really, really easy to do, as well as really, really strong. And that's another reason why this comp is really, really strong, is because there are very few wasted components in the comp. So if you notice, obviously you do need your bows and you do need your rods for your Bard, and any defensive item can really go on Tahm Kench. So if you don't get these 3, something like a Crown Guard will work, a Bramble will work, anything that really gives defensive stats to your Tahm Kench will be strong. And then you're filling out late game with Soraka and Galio items. Soraka, you do generally want a 3-star, but it's not going to be the most important one, especially nowadays, now that Soraka is getting more and more popular, just because she's played in the level 9 max cap package with Rakan and the other Dragon Lords to give you like kind of like a really good synergy pool. So Soraka is a little bit tougher to 3-star. That being said, if you can 3-star her and have her itemized, she is going to be pumping a lot of damage and providing utility to your team just because she mana reaves whoever she's targeting, right? So this comp is pretty straightforward. You just fill it out with 3 mythic and as many bruisers as you can. If you have bruiser +1 from your augment, if you have, you know, bruiser crest or bruiser crown, or maybe you even get 1 off carousel, feel free to put in 6 bruisers. 6 bruisers is really, really strong. And as soon as you get your 3 stars with this comp, if you're not like 20 HP or lower from stage 4 onward, then chances are you will be top 3 or even top 1ing with this comp, just because it caps so high and generally pretty easy to play. Now, the one thing with this comp is that it scales well the sooner you get Bard and Tahm Kench because of how Mythic works. The way Mythic works is you just you gain stats for your Mythics starting from the turn you put them in. So it takes 4 turns to get to, I guess, like the max stacks. So if you're item holding a different unit for this Bard, say it's a Teemo or something like that, maybe even a Zyra, once again playing around Kale or trick shots, then you do want to be putting Bard in as soon as possible, even if it makes you slightly weaker, just to start getting those mythic stacks early, because as soon as you get to Bard 2, you will be really, really strong and really, really stable for most of the game. And then obviously you're scaling when you get them to 3 stars. For the most part, once again, you want to be going to level 7 and rolling for the 3 stars, but oftentimes you'll find that, especially if you're open fording in the early game because you don't have your units yet, you do want to be rolling at 6, once again, to hit the mythic stacks, as well as maybe sometimes say you have a Tahm Kench pair, you can hit a Tahm Kench 2, same thing with Riven 2, you know, any of these 2 stars really, just to get through your mid game. And that's going to be true for the other comps as well, but we'll talk about them when we get there. So next up, we have the Duels comp. This is actually personally my favorite comp. I haven't played it that much, but I played a tournament recently in PvE where I've only played this comp just because it's so straightforward and it's so strong. I'd say if you're not familiar with the set, this is the comp I recommend the most just because of how straightforward it is. It's pretty much the range of placements you can get with this comp is really, really short, really, really small. Just because it's very difficult to go 7th and 8th with this comp because how stable you are in the early game. And some of the early game units with this comp are some of the best units in the game. So Darius upgraded just deals a lot of damage. He can item hold for either your Lee Sin or your Tristana, or just pretty much any type of items you want. He's not going to be the best with physical damage items. Obviously, he's doing primarily magic damage, but being a duelist, he has a lot of attack speed, so he's just going to do a lot of damage regardless. Otherwise, you want to be item holding like a backline 80 carry in the early game, whether it be Sivir or Kiana or something like that, and then eventually you want to transition to Tristana. Ideally, you want to be building Hurricane with the champ. A lot of people have been asked me, or like a lot of the high healer players have even talked about, like, what are you building on Tristana? Is it like IE, Last Whisper, you know, Guardbreaker or Hodge, just to like explode with her ulti cast? But in my opinion, and the stats back it up as well, Tristana is very much an auto attacker, and the strongest auto attack item in the game is Hurricane. I personally think, not realistically, but ideally you have actually 3 Hurricanes on Tristana and you just have it sprinkle down the entire enemy team. And also she gets into the back lines, so she'll finish off low enemy units that are, you know, sprinkled down by your Hurricane. But that being said, that's not too much of a realistic build because that requires 3 bows and 3 cloaks. Most of the time, you're going to be building 1 Hurricane, a red buff for anti-heal, and then, like say, a Last Whisper, i.e. Giant Slayer, any of those items it really will do. If you don't have a Last Whisper on your Tristana, you're going to want to build an Even Shroud on either your Lee Sin or your Volibear. I would say Volibear 3 is really, really unimportant in this comp. It's really just Tristana 3. And the thing with this comp, unlike the last comp, is that you do really want to end up going level 8 because it allows you to fit your synergies more cleanly, as well as letting you upgrade a Lee Sin 2. And Lee Sin 2 in this comp kind of doubles as both like a tanky damage, doubles as both tanky, your main frontliner, and a lot of damage. So he does a lot of single target damage and stuns kind of like big tanks that would otherwise give you trouble. Same with stuff like Kayn and Yone, which are kind of like beefy frontline units that do a lot of damage that you'll be encountering in your games most likely. And Lee Sin is just a really, really strong unit overall. And then you really want to be trying to fit in Diana and Wukong as soon as you can. Diana on 7 and then Wukong as soon as you get them. Irelia, obviously, you won't be able to play until most likely you're level 8. And if you have her on level 7, then you don't have to build Last Whisper because she actually gives the Last Whisper effect on her auto attacks. So if you high roll that, then it's really, really valuable. Then you don't even have to build Last Whisper. That being said, if you already have a Last Whisper, you don't have to feel bad either way. You just still play Irelia anyway, just because she's going to be the strongest duelist you can play. And this comp is also really strong if you have a Duelist +1 in Duelist Crest. Most of the time you just put it on one of these two, and then you end up playing 8 Duelist. 8 Duelist is really, really strong. It doesn't matter. You probably take out Wukong just because Dragon Lord is really, really strong. Well, no, sorry. You probably take out Diana, but most of the time you don't have Wukong, so it doesn't really matter. And then you just put the Duelist Crest on whichever one of them you have at the time. Otherwise, you want to fill out your Volibear items with random tank items. Card specifically is really, really good because this comp really struggles to use Rod and Chains. Another really good item is Hand of Justice on your Lee Sin. I don't have a slot for it right now, but just imagine it's here. These items don't really matter that much. Even the BT, which I would say is probably his best item, matters slightly less because eventually you will be putting in Sage. If you don't have Wukong, oftentimes you are going to be playing something like a Morgana. Can also double as a good Morello holder or tier item holder if you just so happen to have a Morello because you've got dropped too many rods in your game. This comp once again struggles to use rods, so something like a Morello on your Morgana or your Aurelia or something along those lines is going to go a long way to kind of improving the efficacy of your build, right? So otherwise you want to fill your Lee Sin out with bruiser items. Standard melee items are BT, Sterak's, and Titans, but it doesn't really matter. You could just build it with like a TG. You could put Even Shroud on Lee Sin. It doesn't really matter. Just random tank items will do as well, but these are kind of like optimal given you kind of like get those. So the reason why I really like this comp, other than like the kind of range of its placements being so short, is just because if you get dropped, say a Tristana or a Volibear on stage 1 or stage 2, these units will carry out your early and mid game so well that your curve on playing this comp is really, really strong. So these units are really strong at 1 star for most of the game, and then as you get 2 stars, they're pretty competitive with kind of other units that will be kind of coming online at the times where you're likely to get 2 stars of these units. And then obviously at 3 stars, you can look to cap out your board and win the game because this comp also fits legendaries in the form of, once again, Wukong, Irelia. You can easily fit a Rakan in at some point just to give yourself Dragon Lord and to kind of cap yourself further as you reach level 9, as you reach level 10, right? And there's a lot of good augments. Extended Duel, which is the duelist-specific augment, is really, really strong, unlike some of the other trait-specific augments. So it's just really easy to play this comp. There's a lot of generic augments that work really well with this comp as well. So traditionally, if you've noticed, Duelist has been around for a while. So stuff like Gifts of the Fallen, stuff like Harm Assist, Healing Orbs, these are all really good Duelist augments, just because the speed of the fight kind of matters a lot with these comps, and those types of augments just really improve how your units kind of interact with other units, obviously. And stuff like Jewel Gauntlet, any combat augment really, generic combat augment will do really well with this comp. Specifically, this comp will also do really well with Keepers, because pretty much you want to keep your team alive for them to be able to get their Duelist stacks. It stacks up to 12 times. So obviously, if your team has like a shield for the first 8 seconds of the fight through something like Keepers, then they're going to be able to get to those 12 stacks pretty much a lot more reliably. And also, just because this comp fights end pretty much as soon as you hit 12 stacks. Like pretty much the fight doesn't end, but the fight is decided by the time you hit 12 stacks. So if you get stuff like Lock, if you get stuff like Keepers, the fight will be decided very close to when the shield expires. And also, unlike in other comps, Keepers doesn't actually compromise your positioning with this comp, because it's really simple to just like keep all your units kind of in a ball. Aurelia probably is not worth putting all the way at the front, but like any of these units can really go in the front. The reason why Tristana needs to stay in the front 2 rows is because oftentimes you're playing Sage. The way Sage works is that the units in the front get Omnivamp and the units in the back get AP. Obviously, we do not want to be giving our Tristana any AP, So we give her Omni Vamp, which is really, really strong on her, and we just put her in the front. She jumps in, and then she generally lands in a safe spot anyway, so her positioning is largely irrelevant so long as you're not putting her directly in the front line. Obviously, that's not true when you don't have Sage, so I don't have Sage in, then I could just put her back here, and it's like slightly better, but once again, that's why something like Keepers would be really strong. Next up, we have the Yone comp. This is like one of the kind of most popular comps, just because I think Yone is a really, I guess, fun unit. I added your main level 7 comp will be these 7 units on the left. Obviously, you add these in as you see fit. Azir on 8 gives you Invoker. Set and Darius gives you 6 Umbral. If it makes sense to play it. Sometimes you don't have Azir. Obviously, this requires level 10. Sometimes you don't have Azir, and you just have to play 6 Umbral. It's a really cheap way of kind of like maximizing the output of your board, just because 1000 shield on your entire team, no matter where the position, is really, really powerful. Obviously, if you played with Umbral, some of the patterns for it can be a little bit compromising to your positioning. Say you have stuff like support cache, and the reason for that is because all the support items tend to be really good, but the support items obviously demand a certain positioning to get the max value out of it, right? So something like, say you have a Randuin's, then you have to position something like this, but obviously you're not going to be able to get all the Umbral shielding if you position like this, right? So then something like 6 Umbral will allow you to kind of like position, or sorry, get the max value from your trait without compromising your positioning. So pretty much the reason why I put support cache in this specific comp instead of some of the other comps is because melee kind of like hyper carries such as Yone, such as Kayn, generally benefit really well from support items. So there's going to be stuff like Zeke's, Locket, Randuin's even, Aegis of the Legion, ZZ Rot. A lot of these support items just give a lot of value to melee units specifically. Stationary support will be another really strong augment in this comp for the same reason. Anything that gives you support items, encounters, portals, augments, all that fun stuff. I don't know what else gives you support items, but most of them are going to be really, really strong in this comp just because Yone is a hyper melee carry, and you will have to sacrifice your positioning a little bit because depending on the pattern of the Umbral, you're not going to be able to get max value on these items, but either way, it's still a really, really strong option to take when you can. Items for this comp is really basic. You just go BT, Titans, and QSS on Yone. Obviously, if you get something like Banshee's Veil from your support items, then you don't need QSS. There are certain other augments, such as Cyril Veil, that will make it so that you don't need QSS as much. In those cases, you want to go for something like Starax, another Titans, maybe even a Giant Slayer just to do more damage. It doesn't really matter. I put tier and rod items on Alun, who you're also going to want to go for 3-star, but it's not going to be the most important thing, just because she does apply your Morellos really quite well, and she holds your tier items really quite well. Otherwise, you fill Kayn out with random same items as Yone realistically, but I just put these items here as like kind of placeholder items. You do really want to BT Titans ideally on Kayn, but like sometimes you just have to put a Thieves Gloves on him and you're not going to be really unhappy about it. Even Shroud you can put on either Silas or Kayn. It doesn't really matter. If you have an itemized Silas and he's upgraded, then you're going to want to obviously put more items on Silas. Something like Evening Shroud is really good, but I just put it on Kayn because it is a really good item on Kayn, just because Kayn obviously does physical damage, and normally speaking, you're not going to be able to get like perfect items on Kayn after itemizing your Yone anyway. So it's perfectly fine to just put like some of these utility items on Kayn. Otherwise, all comps need anti-heal, so if you don't have a Morello, look for something like a Sunfire on Galio or Silas or whoever you have upgraded. None of these, you don't have to have specifically Ornn or Galio. Something like a Riven to replace Galio for Bruiser is going to be perfectly fine. And another random behemoth, say Cho'gath, even like a 1-cost one like Cho'gath, is going to be completely fine. Thresh generally is quite good as well because he provides a little bit more utility. Same with Shen, so it doesn't really matter if you play Ornn or not. This comp is pretty straightforward. If you get a Reaper +1 in your augment, just play 4 Reaper somehow. It's not going to be that hard. Most of the time you're going to be playing Kindred. 4 Reaper is really strong, but it's not worth playing Kha'Zix to play it. So if you have a Reaper +1, then you play Kindred for your for Reaper, and your Yone and Kayn will probably just clap everything on the enemy team's board. This comp is pretty straightforward. I would say the only thing with this comp is that this comp probably demands that you roll on 6 a little bit more than other comps, just because Yone 1 is less stable for most of the game, as well as the items you're building on Yone are going to be strong on specific units in the early game, whereas like the items you built on kind of these two comps are going to be like a lot more, I guess, versatile in who you itemize, item hold them with. So melee items, generally speaking, the best holders are going to be something like an upgraded 1-cost frontliner, so that's gonna be like Rek'Sai, Garen, Jax. It doesn't really matter that much, but the thing is, I say it doesn't really matter, but they're not gonna be like the strongest thing in the world. So they're not, generally speaking, you want to be rolling on 6 to stabilize a little bit before you go level 7 and just rolling for your 3 stars, right? And finally, we have a 1-cost reroll comp. This is the only 1-cost reroll comp that I believe is even somewhat viable. You can go for Caitlyn 3-star as well, but it's generally played around Kog'Maw and Cho'gath reroll. You itemize Kog'maw with your standard low mana kind of caster items, blue buff, Nashers, and Gunblade. Gunblade can be replaced with anything. It could be like a Death Cap, it could be a Jewel Gauntlet. Jewel Gauntlet generally is not that favored, but any damage item will do. Giant Slayer will be completely fine, Guard Breaker as well. And then you just generally fill your Cho'gath up with same items as you saw me putting on TK. And the reason for that is, once again, your item economy with Declaw and Redemption is quite good. In this comp, it's slightly worse because you do need tier items, but Declaw is really strong because Cho'gath scales really well with HP, same as Tahm Kench. Just because Mythic gives a lot of HP, obviously he's also a 3-star, so Declaw is the best. Otherwise, you just fill it out with random tank items. I put Sunfire because in the current set, and most other sets as well, every comp needs an anti-heal of some kind, whether that be Morello, Red Buff, Sunfire, or certain units and augments that give it. Sunfire is also relatively easy to build because of how strong it makes you in the early game. With this comp, unlike the other comps, you generally want to be rolling to exactly 33 gold on 3-1 at level 4, and then once you've rolled to 33 gold and you've picked up as many Kog'Maw, Caitlyn's, and Cho'Gaths as you can, you'll naturally hit level 5 on 3-2. You put in a Nico, and then you continue slow rolling above 50 gold as soon as whenever you reach it, which will be around 3-3, given there's no encounters or augments that kind of like resupplement your gold. You want to be putting in Nico, and then you want to be 3-starring them by rolling above 50 on level 5. Generally speaking, this is going to be your level 5 board, and then you fill it out with more random stuff as you level up. Hui can be replaced. Hui is like obviously the max cap. He's also a mythic and probably the strongest backline carry in the game right now. You want to be putting this in as soon as you get it, but obviously before you have it, you want to be putting in a Lilia instead, just to give you 5 mythic. Alawi and Nautilus, same idea. Alawi gives you 3 traits actually, and then Nautilus is just a generic frontliner, but you can also itemize. Furthermore, you can itemize Lilia with random late game AP items you get. But generally speaking, that won't really be something that you encounter too often, just because Kog'Maw will be taking these items for the most part. That being said, if you have a Lilia too, then obviously feel free to play it. And say you don't hit Hui and you hit Azir instead, obviously you play Azir. This comp's really straightforward. I put just Mythic Crest generic augments here. Trade Sector, I think, is slightly better for this comp than the other comps, just because Trade Sector value only on 2-1 gets really, really high when you're playing 1-cost reroll, because it allows you to play a stronger board for most of stage 2, as well as because you're staying on level 5 for so long, getting that 1 extra roll per turn is really, really beneficial to you hitting your 3 stars. And yeah, that's this comp, and that's pretty much the video. If you guys liked the video, please feel free to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you guys have any suggestions or feedback, please feel free to leave them down in the comments below. And if you're interested in checking out more of my content, you can follow me at Twitter, also at guubums, and at Twitch when I stream, also at guubums. Thanks. Peace.